In this video, we're just going to take a look at some issues we had with axis, fence guard, and motion guard calibration. So they've introduced this new perspective setup in the guard suite. It's not present in VMD3. We only had small object, short-lived objects there, and swaying objects, which are all in this as well. We'll take a look at later. So we have some tripods set up back here. We know that this one's about 5.5 feet tall. We actually have one right here and one all the way in the back. So first things first, the problem is there's no way to simply zoom in on this. We can do our browser zoom and simply hold control and use a mouse wheel, or actually go up to settings here and zoom in. So we can do that, but it's going to make everything, including text, much larger. Not really quite so usable. DVTEL actually allowed us to zoom in picture just so we could see things. So the second problem is we have these bars which we use to measure, so we're going to put this over our tripod here. This one's pretty easy, it's very clear. However, we have one all the way in the back here, sort of meshes in with the pole, and the problem is, in order to get this accurate, we need to get our ends on it, but the ends are these large dots that we use to grab and resize the line, and it makes it very difficult. DVTEL uses an I-shaped bar because of this, and you can actually resize it with the scroll wheel, so you can adjust that size to fit the object. So once we have our objects in here, let's just do these couple, 5 feet 6 inches, and then bar 2, we'll just put in 6 feet. The other thing we don't have here, which we have in DVTEL, DVTEL actually asks us to draw some lines for distance. So we would measure from, say, this point across the back all the way to here, enter that distance, do the same with a crossing line, just to help it better calibrate perspective. They also offer a horizon line. So the horizon line we would put right about here, just over where we see the cars passing. It uses that to exclude some things from the sky. It also helps it with perspective. Let's just put our last bar in here on this last tripod. Again, fairly difficult. The one thing that we'll see as soon as we enter this is there's really no way to verify anything. Once we hit next down here, it's going to take us into small object setup. So there's really no way for us to verify what a bar we're setting up actually is. Or we can't, say, measure another object in the back to double check. We can't draw a line for distance to double check distance, so we can tell that the camera is really calibrated properly. So it is a bit of a vague calibration. We don't have much guidance here. Really not much of a way to check. Next, we have small object settings. This is enabled by default and set to 1 foot and 8 inches or 50 centimeters. We've left that. We found that it does exclude some things. If we take this all the way off, it finds even more objects. Next, we have our short-lived filter, and whether we want to use this depends on what type of rule we're using. So if we're using a tripwire, for example, generally we're not going to use a short-lived object filter, because if an object appears, that line is generally far enough away from other things that it's not really going to false alarm a lot. If we're using an intrusion zone and motion guard, however, we're going to want to enable this. Otherwise, any object just appearing for even a split second can trigger that rule. So we'll leave that disabled here. Save and close our rule, and that's all there is to setting this up. In motion guard, we also have swaying object settings, which we can draw in here to reduce the alarms from these, but they also reduce range, sometimes in the range of 50 to 80%, depending on the scene. So we're not really recommending them. We do prefer to exclude things wherever possible. So as we can see, despite having set this up, calibrated it, we're still getting a lot of objects here in the brush, various sizes. It's detecting objects sort of all over the screen here. So that about does it for the fence guard calibration setup.